Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter, and I am so excited because I finally get to share some news with you that I have had under my hat for like 6 months, maybe longer. Oh my gosh. I have come out with a line of rubber stamps with rubber stamp tapestry, 5 unmounted sets, and we're going to take a close look at them in a minute here. And we're going to do some coloring today. We are going to stamp some stamps from the Succulent set, do some colored pencil coloring, some masking. I'm going to show you how I made these cards here, and it's going to be a lot of fun. And I'm just so excited to bring you these stamp sets. I hope you love them as much as I loved creating them. And let's go to the table and I'll show you the sets and give you some ideas on how I plan on using them. So without further ado, let's do it. Here are the cards that I made using one of the brand new stamp sets that I have out with rubber stamp tapestry. They're our sponsor today. You can find them online at pegstamps.com, and I'll have a coupon code in the video description so you can save money on the stamps, which is always a nice thing, especially if you're stocking up on a few different sets. So I use colored pencils on these. We're going to go through the techniques on how to stamp these images here from this stamp set so that you can combine them in a bunch of different ways to create a bunch of different scenes, because when I came out with these stamps, I wanted them to be very versatile. I wanted you to be able to use them with things you already had, like pots and window boxes and things like that, but they were also large enough to be on their own, and I wanted them to be really fun to color. I really quickly wanted to show you the other stamp sets that I've just released with rubber stamp tapestry. There is this set of trees, which is great for scene stamping or anytime you want to like accent. They're also good for inking up with your watercolor markers or your watercolor paints, watercolor crayons, and doing some kind of faux watercolor scenes that way. This one's a nice set for fall, woodland harvest, and you've got a naked tree here that you could stamp on some silhouette leaves if you wanted to, and you've got some elements that would be fun to color, like the squirrel and the stump there and the acorns, and this is a lot of fun. This again is designed to use with your watercolors, or we've got this very spacious fir tree here, which is designed to be like stamped in green, like watercolor crayon, watercolor marker, or just regular ink, and then you can stamp in the little birds in red, and you can spackle on some texture paste to give it like a really snowy, wintry look, and you could spackle on texture paste at the bottom. You could do these trees in the background. Just kind of give you some ideas of what I'll be attempting first with these stamp sets. And of course a nice spring set. And this tree was designed really open, very linear, with lots of space so that you could stamp on your summer flowers, your spring flowers and leaves, and just to get a really nice airy look. And of course we get a bunny for Easter, and just a lot of things that you can use with the peg stamps you already have. So I wanted these stamp sets to be versatile and to be a lot of fun to play with, to use your mixed media, and to color. So hopefully it inspires you to do some of those things. So what I decided to do was see how these would work on their own, and also how they'd work with some other things. So if you look over here, I use this pot right here to do the pot in this card, but I kind of like masked off the bottom so you just had a little bit of the pot standing out, and I did kind of like a patina effect with a colored pencil. And then I used just this plain terracotta pot for this one right here, and that was a lot of fun. And I also thought window boxes would be really fun with these too, but I didn't get a chance to experiment with those. But you know, look at the stamps you have and see how you could use those together. So I'm going to show you a couple different masking techniques, and the thing that I like to do when I am stamping is that I will make my masks and I'll stick them to the block of the stamps that I'm using so that I can find them easily, and then when I'm done, what I do is I put them right in the package of the stamp sets they came from, so that way I don't lose them and I can use them over and over again. So when I'm done, I'll just slide them right in here so they're there, and I don't have to cut them again until they get too, you know, inky to use. This is the first thing we're going to stamp, and as you can see, I've arranged a bunch of different elements here. We're going to start off with a piece of Kraft paper. This is mixed media paper. I really like it because if you make a mistake, you can flip it over and it's not going to show through. And you can also use a variety of media from watercolors, inks, all sorts of things, and it can really hold up to the paper. This is, I'll show you the size pad that I got because I think it's really handy for stampers, and it comes in gray or tan, and it's just a 6 by 8 sheet of a pad of Strathmore toned twined mixed media paper. I really like this. And of course, if you're cutting it down like this, you get a lot of backgrounds from one sheet. I'll be doing all 3 demos today on one 6x8 sheet, so it's really easy to use. So the first thing you want to do is figure out what element you want in front. Here I have this little succulent, and that's what I'm going to do first. And I am using Ranger Archival Black. You could use, really, with colored pencils, if you're not using solvent or anything, you can really use whatever ink you prefer. And I'm going to grab my little stamp here and make sure you have it inked up well. And I'm going to stamp that front and center, just like that. And you can see I have my masks stuck to the bottom of my block. And I'm stamping on just a pad of paper. You can see what a good impression you get here. I didn't even cling mount these. I just put some Aleene's Tack It over and over on the back and let it dry. These stamps are such high quality that you're going to get a great impression even if you don't do the cling foam, which is great because it saves you some money, and it also saves you some storage space in your storage binders, however you store your stamps, because they'll be less thick. So I just put a mask on there, and then I'm going to figure out what other elements I want to be in front, and I want one of these kind of in the front. This is a really cute, I don't know what kind of succulent this is, but I have a pot of them growing in my living room on the windowsill. I'm going to put this one over here. So when you're masking, you want to stamp your items that are going to be in the front first. And then, you mask them and then you kind of work backwards. So hopefully that makes sense. If not, it will by the time we're done here. So I'm going to put that mask right down on top of there. Cover it up easily, like nice and precisely. So to make these masks, all I did was I stamped these out on a post-it note. Basically, I like these. These are a little thicker than my regular ones. Unfortunately, they're kind of printed on, so for masking, it might be a little confusing. But I just stamp it as close to as I can on the sticky part, and then cut it out, and then my mask will stick. So behind there, I've got this big cactus right here. So we're going to mask him, stamp him rather next. And he's gonna go, when you're layering your masked items, as you work, you wanna work further up on the card, because if I stamped it down here, it wouldn't make sense, because it would look like this is floating in the air. You want each thing to start a little bit higher in the, on the paper so you have proper perspective. So I'm just gonna give that a little push. There we go. And then I'm going to mask him off. So I'm just actually building my masks up so I know that I'm covering everything as I go. I might need to stop and remove like that one and move it over when I get to that section, but we're good for now. And then I'm going to take this guy here, this long skinny one, and put him back. Oh, you know what? I do have one in front of that. I've got to do this one first. Let me show you here. This one is in front of that one, so that one's going to go first. So we'll put him on first. And he'll go right here. And then we'll put his mask down. It's so fun when you take the masks off and you get to see where everything ended up. And then I'm going to stamp this guy here. And we'll put his mask down. And I cannot stress it enough, save these because they take some time to cut out, and it's so nice when you have them all done and then you don't have to do them again. And then we're going to go back to this guy, and we're going to put him kind of poking out over there. This is my favorite one, I think. And I like this because it gives you a chance to try every stamp in the set. Okay, and then we are going to swap this mask. We're going to pick this one up and we're going to move him over there so that we can stamp a few of the kind of like aloe-y looking ones. And that's right here. Looks like kind of like grasses or aloe. You see, you can use it for either, which is nice. And we're going to stamp one up there. You could just do one, or you could do a couple. It's up to you. I think I'll do kind of one poking out over there. Okay, so now remove all of our masks. Oops, I had ink on my finger, but that's all right. We can cover that up with some colored pencil when we go to color it. And there we have our succulent scene. So I designed these to be open on the bottom so they'd be really easy to kind of like put dirt around, put in a plant pot. But right here, it looks like that should be more complete. So if you want to, you can just go in with a micron and or whatever black pen you like and just complete that line. And there you have, you know, a very finished look. Now something I did realize, because I smudged ink on another project, I used a kneaded eraser, which is kind of an art supply product, and you can remove a lot of ink that way, especially if it's on top of colored pencil, because I dropped an ink pad on like my finished card of this design, and I was able to remove my ink. It's not going to come off there, but that's all right. We'll use colored pencil or we'll trim it off, so I'm not going to worry about that. So I want to show you how I stamp the other two before we do any coloring, since we have our inks out. So we'll show you how to do, I'll show you how to do this one first, because that one's a little bit simpler. The pot is in the front, so that's the first thing we're going to stamp. Let me get my ink pad here. And we'll stamp that on towards the bottom of our paper. And then we're going to mask that. So I got my mask right there. Stick that right on top. And then we will stamp, we'll start off with this guy right here, this little aloe. He's in there twice. We'll put him in the pot. And we'll also put him next to the pot, but remember up higher because we want it to be behind, so he's got to start higher. If we started it down there, it wouldn't look right. There we go. And then I have two masks cut for that, so I can mask both of those off. So they do get a little confusing looking after you've stamped on them a few times, but they'll still work just fine. Okay, now we're gonna want a few of these other ones. We'll go with this big one right here because we'll have him a couple times. We'll do one over here, and we'll do one over on this side. A nice cluster of succulents. So masking is not difficult. You just need to, you know, you just get in the hang of how to do it. Once you've done it a few times, it's not too bad. And then I want this guy here. He's gonna give us some height over there. So it's kind of like you're a flower arranger. I really like that because it gives you a lot of chances to work on design. There we go. And then we're gonna mask that, and then we're gonna do the spiky aloe a couple times to fill in. So it's honestly, it's just like you're flower arranging here. So we're going to get one of those over there. And we'll do one over here. Make sure that's lined up. That might have been up a little higher than my last one, but that's all right. Everyone's a little different. And there we've got that scene. Again, we can complete this line since it's kind of standing out on its own. It's not in a pot or not on top of the dirt. We're kind of seeing it on its own. And there we have that design. And the other one, the only thing that makes the other one maybe a tiny little bit trickier is that we are masking the pot a little bit. So let's look at the example from this one. So here we have some stuff growing in front of the pot. And we also have a few little hand-drawn rocks, which are really, really easy to do. We're going to start again with what's in front, which would be this and the little spiky aloe. I don't like how I line them up perfectly there. They look too matchy, so I'm going to tip one a little bit so it doesn't quite look so matchy. We're going to start off with our little aloe here, our little succulent here. We're going to put that a little down on the bottom, off to the side a little bit. Okay, then we're going to go with we're going to mask that. Put that right down on top. We are going to stamp this little grass here. I'm going to tip it a little bit that way. we are going to mask that. And then we're going to stamp it again and tip it the other way a little bit. Keep it from looking too matchy-matchy. And then we're going to mask that. And now we're going to find the pot that we're going to use. And this is too long. We just kind of want the top of that pot sticking out. So what I do in that situation is I actually mask the bottom of my paper like that. And you can reuse your Post-it notes. Obviously you can reuse the cut ones, but you can reuse the flat ones as well. And then just figure out about how high you want that to go. And sometimes I'll give it a little more pressure when I'm stamping over like layers of masking like that, so I don't end up with any halos. But again, you can use your marker and you can fill it in. And then I'm going to put that over my pot that I just put in there, and I'm going to stamp in some other little items here. We'll put that guy in the pot and we'll mask him. See, it's the same thing over and over again. Just keep working back. So if you look at the items in the pot, we've got that succulent in front, then we've got this spiky one behind that, so that's the next one we're going to stamp, and then finally we have this cactus in the way back, so that's the last thing we're going to stamp. So just kind of remember, as long as you remember you're working front to back when you are stamping, you're not going to get confused. It takes, honestly, it doesn't really make that much sense until you do it. So if you're confused, just grab a few stamps, it doesn't really matter what ones, and try the technique, and you'll see what I mean. You know, you can do this with any stamp. This, you know, this is a technique that's been around for a long time because it's useful and it's really fun. Put this one up, and here we go, our last stamp in the scene. And I just love how easily these work together. Okay, so then if you decide you want to augment your design, oh, that all came off in one piece, that's good, then you grab your pen and you can draw some rocks, some dirt, some pebbles. You can complete any lines if you want, or you can put rocks in front of the little scene. Do it however you like. If you want to put a few more spikes in here, if you're like, oh, that looks a little matchy, maybe I'll put a couple others in there. That's your decision. You can do that. Just try to find a pen that's about the same thickness as the stamp I use. This is an 03 micron, and that works pretty well. You might even want a little bit thicker of a line, but that's how you stamp that scene. So you can see you can use any of these stamps on their own, but you can also combine them to make an endless variety of different designs. Now I'm going to share with you the colored pencil techniques I like to use on colored cardstock. Coloring on colored cardstock or any sort of toned paper is really wonderful because you have a tone on the paper. So if you don't want to do a background, it's still going to look fantastic because you've got so much of the area colored in already. I'm using Prismacolor colored pencils here mainly because they're a little more opaque than other brands, so they show up on the toned paper quite a bit better. So we're going to start off with a very simple technique on this front succulent. And I'm going in and adding a very thin light, I'm very little pressure, I'm hardly holding onto the pencil. Now that I have that light coating of spring green down, I'm going to go in with a highlight color. I'm just going to grab some white and I'm going to go in on the tips of each of the points of the leaves here and just give a little highlight. Again, I'm not using a lot of pressure yet, I'm just putting in that color. You can layer quite a bit on this paper even though it's pretty smooth. You just want to make sure that if you do want to keep adding shadows and layers that you don't press too hard because that'll fill the tooth of the paper with wax and then you won't be able to add any more. Now I'm going in with a kind of bluish green color. This is called peacock green, and I'm going to go put in some shadows. You will need to keep some of your colors fairly sharp so that you can get into the smaller areas of your rubber stamp designs. But I do find that if I work in little circles like this, I get a really nice blend even if the pencil is a little on the sharp side. And this, I will be editing some parts out because it gets very time consuming and it's very repetitive after a while. So I just want to show you the main techniques on how to create these. And getting our shadow in. And you can keep layering if you decide you want it a little bit darker, go in with a little more pressure, do a little more layering. It's very very therapeutic, and it's very, you know, you can kind of go by your gut. I'm going to go back in with that lighter green color now, that spring green, and I am going to go over everything to blend the colors together. So this is just a basic colored pencil layering technique. And the thing I like about colored pencils doing succulents is that succulents have that kind of waxy, you know, surface to them. So it this captures that perfectly, I think. And so here this is called burnishing too. As you go over with a little more pressure and you start to clog the tooth of the paper, and it makes it kind of all blended and unified. There. And if you feel like that's, you know, you want it to be a little bit cooler in temperature, you can also adjust by going over with like a kind of a gray blue green, and you can tone down the vibrancy a little bit, so it's very forgiving. Every time you add another layer, it's going to stick a little less, so you're not going to get quite as much of a contrast each time, so you can really adjust subtly. And then I'm just going in with a final shadow. And this is the same way that we would do the long spiky flowers, and I'll show you that. I'll show you a couple leaves on that next. And see, we get some really nice dimension here. Now on some of these, like this one here, it's that same plant, but I did the tips of the of each of the points of each of the leaves in magenta, and that just gave it that sort of look. So, you know, you can really kind of change these up to be whatever you want them to be. I'm going to go in and just brighten up my highlights a little bit, and then this one is going to be done. And you don't have to have the exact same colors that I'm using, you know, just approximate with what you have, the brands that you have. I'm sure it'll work with whatever color pencils you happen to have. So it's kind of the same idea for the little spiky ones here. I would start off with a light coating of this color here. It's kind of like almost like a slate green. It's just a very pale grayish green. Again, use whatever you have, or a cool gray you could use, because you don't want this one to be quite as vibrant. Okay, I'm just going to do this little cluster up here. I'll do the rest off camera because it's pretty repetitive. And again, go in with my highlight color, get that on the tips. And you'll get faster the more that you do this. I'm kind of doing this fairly slowly so that you can see what we're doing. And then I'm going to go in with a darker color, and I think I'll actually use the same color I used on the other plant, because that was a really good shadow color for this. And I'm just doing that at the bottom where the leaves kind of join and overlap a little bit. And I can go in and blend with that first kind of greenish gray color. And I can bring out my highlights again if I want to, if I feel like it needs it. You can also add like light pale, like cloud blue to it if you want to. And get the colors, you layer whatever colors you have that gives you the look that you like. And I'll bring that up a little bit closer so you can kind of see how that looks. So that's how you do each of these portions. I'm going to get those done, and then we'll come back and work on some of the other plants. Next, we're going to work on this plant right here, and we're going to try a different coloring technique. And this one is where we go in and we lay down our highlights and our shadows first, and then go in with a midtone. So I am taking my white and I am adding it at the top of each of these big leaves. And when you start to feel confident, you can use a little bit more pressure. I'm not using a lot of pressure. Most of this is built up by layering, so if you have any arthritis or difficulty putting pressure on your pencils, working in layers on a toned paper really can be a way that you can enjoy using colored pencils and not have the discomfort that you may have had in the past. Also, having a very soft pencil helps, like these Prismacolors. They're just so soft, and they put down so much color that that it really helps in that sort of situation. I'm going to go in with a really dark green. It's actually called dark green, but you know, anything looks kind of like this. I'm not using a lot of pressure, like I said before, but you can see how much color is coming out. So my shadows are almost coming up to meet the highlight. And I'm also using the shape of the leaf as a guide. I am working in circles, and I am concentrating this to the bottom and the center of the leaves. Where I have overlaps, I want to make sure my darkest shadow is right there next to the object that's overlapping it, because that would give you a nice sense of depth there. And I'm using less pressure. I'm not using much pressure at all, but I'm using less as I come up towards that highlight. So these colors are going to be very pronounced because I'm laying them right on the bare paper. Whatever you put down first will be the most, I would say, prominent color. The reason I like this technique so much is that it's so quick. Now I'm going to go in with that bright spring green that we used on that first. Remember how we started that one with our base color, our local color, and we just did like a nice light coating? Well, here we're going to actually just go over that and blend. Okay, I'm still not using a ton of pressure here, but it's not going to really take that much. And I'm just using that to blend those two colors together a little bit. And really, I mean, you can go back in with more highlight and shadow, but if you're pressed for time, this is going to look just fine. Because sometimes we have hours to sit and color, and that's awesome and it's so much fun. Other times we are more of on a time crunch. Or we maybe only have like 15 minutes to work on a card, and we want to make the most of our time. I'm trying to keep my hand out of the way there. If you hold your pencil from the end, like closer to the end, you're going to have less pressure. If you want more pressure, hold it to the top. That way you don't have to, you don't have to harm your wrists to get that pressure you want. Just hold it a little closer to the tip and you'll get a little more pressure. I just try to be, and you'll have more control too. I try to be mindful not to get my hand in the way when I'm filming a tutorial, but if I'm doing this, not doing a tutorial, my fingers are pretty close to the tip when I want to do more pressure. That way it just saves a little wear and tear on my wrists. I don't have a problem with, fatigue, but if you're coloring for a long time, anyone's going to get some fatigue there. And so there you see, you get a really great shadowed look with very little effort. If you want to pump it up a little bit more, you grab your white again and just hit those highlight areas. And again, it's not going to let you go too overboard because you've already put so much wax down that it's going to just be kind of like a subtle highlight. And you do have to add quite a bit of pressure if you do want to go in and add a highlight on top of all that wax. And that's going to give you a little burnishing. And if you want to go in and put more shadow in, you can do that too, but that's completely up to you. I decided to zoom in for these last couple demos because they are kind of small and tucked in behind, and I didn't want you to miss anything. I'm sorry that you can't see the picture as I'm coloring it, but if you wanted to go to my website, go to my blog, thefrugalcrafter.wordpress.com. In a day or two, I will have the photos there for you to look at if you want to, open that up on your computer while you're coloring, and that's helpful for you. So what I'm doing is I'm going in with that dark green on this cactus in back, getting in my dark shadows. Now this is going to be overall a darker cactus. I like to vary their colors a little bit so that I do have some contrast. And I'm going to grab some indigo, which is my favorite dark. I rarely use black. I find the indigo and terracotta are what I use the most when I want to get earthy tones or almost blacks or shadows. And I'll show you how I mix those to do the dirt, like the ground, after we're done coloring our images here. So there we get that nice shadow. So for the brighter green, I'm going to use kind of an earthy, more of like a olivey color here. The printing is so small in these pencils that I can't even make it out, but it's like an olive green. And I'm using that to actually blend and burnish too. So remember, you want more pressure, hold it closer to the tip. I'm holding it back a little bit just so my hand's not in the way for you. I know I get a little shadow there sometimes. And now that did take out a lot of our distinction there, so I'm just going to go in with this really light green and then get the edges there so we get a little bit of a little definition. And if I want it darker, I can go in with my indigo and darken up some areas. Now for the red top here, I'm actually going to go in with a really dark red brown color. This is called Tuscan Red, and I actually remember that one. I don't have to read it because I remember it. It's just this really dark, earthy, brownish red color, and I use it a lot for like terracotta pots too. It's just a wonderful color if you want to mix some darks. I think some people think you can't mix colors in colored pencil. It's not that you're mixing them so much, it's more that you're layering them. So I'm going in and getting in some of the darkest color. Then I'm going to go in and get kind of an overall shade to go on top of everything, and I'm using just this poppy red. Just give it a nice coating all over everything. Not too much pressure. Notice just light pressure here. So, you know, you can really go in any order you want. I'm going to grab some yellow, put some yellow in my highlight areas. I don't like to use white if I'm highlighting red, because if you use white when you're highlighting red, you get pink, because white and red make pink. But if you go in with yellow, that's going to keep that tomato red color that you're going for. And now I'm going to go in with another bright red. This is the same poppy red actually. And I am going to blend those colors together, and that's going to help me keep that nice bright red. Bright red that's a little bit warmer. You could do a cooler red, you could add some magenta to this if you wanted to cool it down. It's completely up to you. And you could even go in, if you wanted to darken some areas, you could go in with that indigo. I wouldn't use it too much because indigo is a blue and you've got a lot of orangey red here, so you could end up getting some brown. So I would just kind of do it here and there as needed. Now once you have all that yellow down there, if you do want some super bright highlights, you can go in with white. I would sharpen it first though. So I keep a little handheld sharpener here on my table, and that does the trick. Sometimes the Prismacolors can be a little finicky, and I'll have to go out and use the electric sharpener because just the jarring of the handheld sharpener. And I'm trying to get in the habit of turning the sharpener, not my hand, but honestly I find that really difficult. And if you really want to pump up a color, you can add like a neon. This is like a neon red, and that will help give you some nice vibrant color. But that's how we're going to do that. Now for these little spiky ones in here, you'll need a fairly sharp pencil. Again, I'm going to use the dark green. Mine's pretty sharp. And the reason you want it kind of dark here, if you had a dark cactus in front, you could do it light. You just want to get some contrast. And I like to put them at the bottom of each of the spikes, and also the spikes in back, so that you get that kind of like definition. And I'm just going to go in and kind of fill in. If you got some lines, because like you've stamped a few things and they've overlapped, you're not exactly sure what's happening there, grab your dark color, whatever you're using to shadow, use that and just kind of fill in a little bit. Nobody's going to know that you've got some questionable stuff happening and you don't really remember what was in there. I think I'll make all these back here pretty dark. And that's a wonderful thing about nature. You get so many different colors that you don't have to worry about matching anything exactly. This pencil's getting to the point where I probably should sharpen it, but I'm going to see if I can get a few more swipes of color before I do. And then I would just go back in with that dark green and blend some of those colors. You can always go online and look up pictures of succulents and get some inspiration if you're not sure how you want to color it. Now over here we've got our last succulent. I'm going to keep it zoomed in. Now this, sometimes you have a situation where you have bright contrasts, and in that case I'll go in with my brightest colors first, because they'll almost act like a resist and protect the paper for me, so if I do go crazy coloring I can get it back. So I'm going in with this nice bright yellow, and I'm going to do all of these little spots. They're like little clusters of prickles, truth be told, but I just want to make sure that I'm keeping that color accessible. I don't want to lose all that color. You could even do like just wiggle your pencil, give it kind of a scribble in there if you want to. But you just want to get that suggestion of that yellow. I don't spend hours and hours coloring an image. I'm going to go in, I think I'll start actually in with my indigo because I know I'm going to want it. And I am going to start adding some really, really light pressure shadow here next to the crease on this cactus, because there's like the spikes are on the, they kind of comes out like a star, and the spikes are on the peaks of each of the stars. So that's what I am doing, is kind of adding the shadows in with lights coming in here, so that one, that spike in the front would get a highlight from both sides. Now I'm going to go into my dark green. Try not to bang your pencils around too much. Try not to let them roll off your table onto the floor. So if you have like a little cup or a tray you can put your pencils in when you're working on them so they don't roll off your table, that would be a really good idea, because once they drop and the lid breaks inside, it can be really frustrating. What I'll do is I'll put them like under a heating pad to help fuse them back together if that happens. But still, that's kind of a pain when you're in the middle of a project and then you realize that you've just broken a lead and you've got to go through all that before you can even use it. And so now I'm using probably medium pressure, and I'm just going over all of these shadow areas. I could have been a little bit heavier handed with my shadows, because I can see that I'm going to need to go in and add another layer. But that's alright, it's fun. I spent all day, I was coloring these things, I was having a ball yesterday, and then I realized, oh, I need to make a video. But I think that's a good sign when you've got something that you're having so much fun with, especially if it's something you've designed. I think that's a good sign that you made something that other people are going to have fun with. I hope you guys have so much fun with these. I'm really excited about these. And you can add some more shadow. You can add shadow on the other areas closer to the bottom. I like to give myself a little contrast behind the, and a little shadow behind other elements, just so you kind of get that depth. So like a little closer to the ground, I'm just going to very lightly, little circles of color there. I wish these plants grew outside around here. They're so pretty. And you can build up as much color or as little color as you like. It's completely up to you. How dark you want different elements. Alright, maybe a little bit more indigo there. And again, I'm just trying to define that front aloe. And if you want to glaze over with another color, you can. If you decide you want to like maybe darken it all together, you can grab another shade of green. I haven't used this one before today, so this is grass green. I'm going to give this all a coating of that, just to kind of make it a little different than the other succulents that I was sketching. I want to show you a couple different ways that you can do a background. Of course, it'd be just fine to leave it like this. I've got a couple different examples here. So for this, all I did was put a little bit of shadow underneath just by layering indigo and terracotta. And I think that's lovely, and that's certainly the quickest of the different options I'm going to show you. The other way you can do it is to make a frame. You can either do a frame all the way around like I did here and fill it in with pencil, or you can do a partial frame. Like on this one, I had a frame up top and I had just kind of soft shadows underneath. And it's just completely up to you what you feel like it needs. If you had a boo-boo, I was able to erase some of that with an ink eraser here, like those kinds you used to use with a typewriter, if you're old enough to remember that. I am. So that will, I don't feel like that's like a big boo-boo I have to cover up. So I think maybe I'll do a partial frame. And to do that, all you need is a ruler. And I just eyeball it. And it's kind of fun if you have something kind of hanging over the edge, because you can make your frame kind of behind the elements and kind of have them pop out. And I think that looks really fantastic. And you can make your frame as big or as little as you want. And you just want a sharp pencil. I'm just going to use this guy here. It's one of my Chameleon pencils. Those are really fun too. They're just not quite as opaque and soft. So if you do have some, arthritis issues like that, they might be a little more difficult to color with on colored paper. On white paper though, they're going to show up just fine. So, just with a colored paper, I like to have something really soft and opaque, like a Color Soft or a Prismacolor. So you just want a line that's dark enough for you to see it. And then when I am doing a sky, what I like to do is I'll start with a darker color towards the top. And what I do is my circles here, or you can use the flat of your pencil and just do really, really light color. You just don't want to scribe the paper, because once you scribe the paper, then it's really hard to blend on top of that. So very, very, very light pressure. And I'll just do a portion of this just so you can kind of see how I do this. You could use a solvent to blend this. I will tell you, solvents are not my favorite on colored paper because they tend to make the color disappear. So I tend not to use solvents on colored paper. And then I will get up on the tip of the pencil right on the edge of the line that I drew and just do little circles. You could also use masking tape to tape this down and just color right up to the masking tape. Just make sure that your tape isn't so strong that it's going to rip your paper. So I would test it on a scrap of paper or on the back side of your paper first to make sure that you're not going to go through all this work of coloring something and then have it rip. So at that point, once I've got that kind of faded down a little bit, as I go down, I use less pressure, so very, very little pressure. Okay. Great way to get some practicing doing these cards, you know. And then I would go in with a lighter color like this cloud blue, and I would start overlapping. And this is going to start burnishing your color as well. So you want to try to do this so you don't have too many like pencil strokes. And I just kind of fade it down towards my my subject. I don't go right up to it. And this is going to take a little time, so just kind of be aware, and it's going to take a little practice. So you might not end up with a perfectly smooth background. I don't color with colored pencils that often, so I don't have a perfectly smooth background. I still think it looks really pretty. It's not perfect. And I would probably do all of my darks first, then do my lighter color, and then layer over with my darker color, and not just work like in a section like I am here. But I did want to respect your time and try to make this as concise as possible, because colored pencils can be a little time consuming, but it's a lot of fun. There's no rule saying everything has to be quick and easy. This is easy enough, it's just not particularly quick. So there you can see how, like, the techniques to get that blend in your sky if you want to do it. If you don't, you don't have to. Okay, to do the shadow underneath, I like to do a layered approach, and I will use a couple different colors. I love my terracotta, I love my Tuscan Red, which is that darker color, and I love my indigo. Those are the colors that I like to use the most, and you don't need them particularly sharp for this stage of the game here. So what I always start with my my reddish brown color. I like to start with the darker of the two, which is the Tuscan Red. And I'm just kind of going in very, very, very lightly, very little pressure. You can always go back and add more, but if you start with a lot of pressure, then you are going to have to add more and more and more pressure for every layer you put in, and it's just going to be a lot more work, where you might like get one layer down and like, I think this looks all right. I guess I don't need to keep adding. So, you know, it's kind of nice if you give yourself that flexibility. So I am just very, very lightly putting in the shadow. You can pretend like you're shading with gray. It's the same idea. You're going to be more pressure, darker towards the objects, and lighter as you fade out away from them. Then I'm going to go in with my indigo and not go as far, just kind of overlapping the areas next to the objects where it's going to be a little darker. And of course you could hand draw some rocks, and like I showed you on that one of those plant pot ones, if you want to. You don't have to. But that's what's so fun about these kind of doodly stamps, is that anybody can draw a rock, anybody could throw in an extra leaf. It doesn't, you know, you can all do that. And then make the stamps a little more versatile. So here I'm very little pressure, holding the edge, using the edge of the pencil. I'm just kind of fading it out. Now if I had wanted to have a frame all the way down like I did on that other card, I simply would have, when I drew that box, I would have continued the line all the way around. I would have used brown on the bottom though, and then I would just fade this same color out to the edge. So that's how you do that coloring. I'm going to finish coloring this up, and then when we come back, I'll just show you how I easily turn these into cards. Now we're going to put together the card, and it's actually pretty easy. I like to keep the treatment very simple when I've spent a lot of time coloring, so I can keep the attention on the stamped image and the coloring. So I've already trimmed down some paper. I took a 10 by 7 piece of cardstock and I folded it in half, and then I've got a couple matting layers. This first one I'm going to glue down is It is 6 3/4 by 4 3/4, so it'll layer nicely. And a tip, whenever you're card making, if you buy the pattern like paper stacks, all those papers are generally designed to work well together, so it can take a lot of the guesswork out of picking patterns. And also, if you have the double-sided ones, if you have a little sliver or a scrap left over from the back side, you could always use that as an embellishment. Simply die cut like a heart or a flower or a leaf or something like that. It just makes for a really nice card. And I'm just layering these up. Very, very simple. So if you're doing these like assembly line style, you can definitely make a batch of cards pretty quickly, even though you're spending a lot of time on the coloring. And then I took 2 shades of baker's twine. I have a peach and an aqua. I thought those were really pretty. So all I'm going to do is just wrap them around my card and tie them in a bow, just like so. And then I'm going to trim off the excess. I don't have my ribbon scissors upstairs, so hopefully, oh good, those are going to cut that fine. You could use any string you like. I like to kind of spread the strings apart so that you can kind of see them a little bit better, but you can leave them together if you want. There's no rules. Either way is fine. And then for an embellishment, I am going to take a button that I just put a little adhesive dot on the back, and I'm just going to press that over the knot. I think that looks really pretty. So there you have it. We have masked and colored, and the coloring for these other two are exactly the same. You just, you know, vary up the colors. I really like that with a little touch of pink on the top, but that's completely up to you. Again, I'll put finished photos on my blog, thefrugalcrafter.wordpress.com, so you can take a look at them and see what you think. This one right here, I made little notches in the corners of the mat, and I just wrapped the twine around, so I made kind of like a little frame. So keep your embellishments really simple when you're spending a lot of time coloring, so your artistry can really show through. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up and subscribe, and if you want to find these stamps, I have links below to our sponsor, Rubber Stamp Tapestry. You can find them at pegstamps.com, and don't forget to use the coupon code if you're placing an order. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy crafting.